Hello, and welcome to the movie universe. I'm your host, Movie Fan. Today, I'll be talking about The Day the Earth Stood Still. This movie is by far one of the greatest sci-fi movies ever created, right up there with Forbidden Planet and War of the Worlds. I have watched this movie for a long time, and I never get tired of watching it. The story takes place in 1951. It's an average day when all of a sudden a UFO lands right in the middle of a baseball field. As you may have imagined, the people are shocked to see this out there, and the military immediately mobilizes around the ship. Already the people are panicking, fearing that an alien invasion is coming right their way. And out of nowhere, the ship's door begins to open, and out comes Klaatu. He steps out of his ship and says, "We come in peace." And in his hand is a little device. He opens it, and a trigger-happy soldier shoots him right in the arm. Just then, Gort appears, and he sees that Klaatu has been shot. And Gort opens his visor and shoots his laser right at their guns, and a tank, and at a howitzer, melting every one of them. Klaatu calls him off, telling him to stop, and Klaatu says what that device in his hand was. It was a gift for the president. It would have enabled him to see all the inhabited planets in the universe. They take him to the hospital, and under military guard, he is watched 24/7. Klaatu is visited by the president's secretary, who wants to know why he's here. And of course, Klaatu says he'd be glad to tell him, but not just him alone, because he has come delivering a message to all the people in the world, because, as he put it, it is not meant for one nation, it is meant for all nations. But of course, the politicians refuse to cooperate with each other. The Russians refuse to come to Washington unless the meeting can be held in Moscow. The English, of course, refuse to go to Moscow unless the meeting can be held in America. Basically, it was one of those little things that was going on back in the 1950s. You know, the Russians didn't trust us, we didn't trust them, and with good reason, I might add. Of course, Klaatu is frustrated by all this because his message is very important. So he decides to try to learn more about the people and their problems in order to understand them better. Because he tells the president's secretary that where he comes from, they've learned to live without stupidity. And he does not care about our petty squabbles or our mistrust of each other. He's just here to deliver his message. Of course, the military is not going to let him go out there and mingle among the people, so they lock him in his room. But he escapes. How? Nobody knows. He just escaped. He goes to a little boarding house and rents a room under the name John Carpenter, where he meets Helen Benson and her son Bobby. He later meets Helen's boyfriend, Tom, who was trying to get her to go on a date with him, but she had no one to take care of Bobby. Klaatu volunteers, and Bobby gives him a tour of the city. They visit the Arlington Cemetery where his father is laid to rest. They visit the spaceship and the Lincoln Memorial. Klaatu reads the words of the Gettysburg Address that's on the memorial, and he comes to the conclusion that if he cannot reason with the politicians to deliver his message, maybe he could speak to Earth's scientists. So he and Bobby go to see Professor Barnhart, a brilliant scientist who works for the military. He wasn't in, so he leaves a little calling card. That calling card was the answer to a mathematical problem that the professor was working on in his office. Of course, he also wrote his name and his address. Professor Barnhart sends the FBI out after him to bring him there. And when he's there, he tells the professor who he really is. Out of curiosity, he had to try to find out why he's here and all that. However, Klaatu tells him the same thing that he told the president's secretary, that his message is not just for any one person or any one nation. It's meant for all nations. And so he proposes that he gathers up all of Earth's scientists to have a meeting right there at the spaceship so he can tell them the message, and they in turn can tell all the world leaders. Of course, the professor agreed to this, but the problem was how to get people to listen. So he figures a show of force might help. Just something minor, something to grab everyone's attention. Nothing that would involve hurting anyone or destroying any property. Klaatu comes up with just a thing, but he has to go to the spaceship in order to do so. When he goes to the spaceship, Bobby follows him and he sees that he goes right in there. So he must be the spaceman. He tells his mom, but she doesn't believe him, and neither does her boyfriend until they search his room, and there they find diamonds. The boyfriend takes the diamonds to a jeweler who could not identify him. He said there's never been diamonds like this on Earth. So he comes to the conclusion that he must be the alien. Meanwhile, Klaatu comes to visit Helen at her work so he could try to talk to her about what he's up to. And when they're in the elevator stops. Klaatu tells her that all the electricity around the world has been neutralized and will only go for 30 minutes. It is here that we see that everything is stopped. Trains have stopped, dryers, washers, cars, TV sets, tractors. Just about everything has stopped. No electricity is flowing anywhere, except for hospitals and airplanes that are in flight. Of course, Professor Barnhart is very impressed about how they did this, and he's quite glad that it's making people feel uneasy enough to want to listen. However, the military has other ideas. They order that if they find him, they will shoot him on sight. During this time, Klaatu told Helen everything about why he's here. She knows that he must deliver his message, and she knows that she must stop her boyfriend from telling anyone who he is. And she tried to stop him, but unfortunately, he made it very clear that he doesn't care about the rest of the world, just about writing his own meal ticket. He informs the military, and they track him down. During that time, Klaatu is talking to Helen, saying that he's worried about Gort, that if anything happens to him, he could easily destroy the world. So he tells her that if anything should ever happen to him, she must go to Gort and tell him these words, Klaatu Barada Nikto. The military catches up with the pair, and they shoot Klaatu, killing him instantly. Helen runs quickly to the saucer, and Gort is already on his attack. He destroys the sentries that are there to guard him, and Helen utters the words, Klaatu Barada Nikto. He carries her to the spaceship and leaves to retrieve Klaatu. Gort brings him back and puts him in a machine, and it brings him back to life. All the scientists are assembled outside the saucer. Klaatu emerges from the saucer with Helen, and he finally reveals his message. His message is, it was basically that we need to grow up. We need to learn to get along and to live with each other in peace. For they have been watching us for quite some time now. They know that we are starting to develop atomic energy, and they've seen our ability to commit war, and that, of course, is what worries them. Considering how that we're finally starting to catch up to them, they figured that now is the time to try to extend their hand to promote peace between them and us, but at the same time to give us a little warning that we need to grow up. We need to try to learn to get along with people, and not just people of Earth, but the people of outer space. He even talks about Gort, saying that the robots are actually a police force that are designed to patrol the galaxy and to preserve the peace, and that if anyone shows any sign of aggression, they annihilate it. In his own words, quote unquote, it is no concern of ours how you run your own planet, but if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burnt-out cinder. Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. Klaatu then steps into the spaceship along with Gort, and he leaves. This movie is a true classic, without a doubt. It is one of the few films that has absolutely no gunplay going on. And what I mean by that is, you got movies like War of the Worlds where you see aliens trying to annihilate us. That doesn't happen here. The special effects are great. For instance, you got the ship. It is absolutely fantastic. And I'll tell you this, every time I see the door open and the ramp come out, that still amazes me even to this day. I cannot figure out how they pulled that off, because it comes out so perfect. And then there's Gort himself. Now, obviously, Gort was a man in a costume, and that man was Lock Martin. The look of Gort is absolutely awesome, and it's always something to watch him use his laser. But of course, it's the cast that make this movie so great. Helen's boyfriend Tom is played by Hugh Marlowe, a very well-known actor who played in lots of sci-fi movies. He plays his part beautifully. I mean, he comes off as the kind of guy who really likes Helen, but at the same time, he's only thinking of himself. Helen Benson, of course, is played by the lovely Patricia Neal, and she plays her part to the letter. She was intelligent. In fact, in this movie, she was the only one who considered the possibility that Klaatu may not be a threat to us. And of course, our leading man, Klaatu, is played by Michael Rainey. Michael Rainey plays Klaatu so perfectly. There is no one, and I do mean no one, who could play Klaatu the way he did. With that dignified accent of his and his intelligent demeanor, he just plays him so perfectly that whatever I say cannot do him justice. Michael Rainey was the perfect choice for Klaatu. If you show anyone this film, they immediately know who the main star is. This is truly, by far, one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time. And this was the first film to ever try and take a different approach to aliens. Because at that time, it was all aliens coming to destroy us. Where instead, he came to deliver a message of peace. And this was way before Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I would recommend to everyone that if you haven't seen it, look it up because it is fantastic. So to anyone who's never seen it, if you ever get the chance to look it up and watch it, let me know what you think. This is Movie Fan, signing off.